to the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, and for our fourth segment of today's show, we're going to be talking about the biggest games of the college basketball weekend coming up here, especially in the SEC. The SEC looking like a conference that's going to send the most teams out of any specific conference this season, but still a lot of important games between a lot of top 25 teams. So without further ado, let's just jump into it right away, starting off with perhaps the most intriguing game, in my opinion, of the weekend in the SEC. Let's talk about this Texas A&M Florida game, because these are two teams seemingly headed in opposite directions. Texas A&M still remaining among the quote-unquote elite of the college basketball world, but have not impressed against AP top 10 teams specifically. They fell to Tennessee last Saturday and now take on top 3 Florida. But Florida themselves coming up against an upset loss to Georgia, albeit on the road, but still a shocking loss where they got stretched out a little bit in terms of that Georgia team's perimeter shooting, and really could have won that game by the way they came back. They proved that they can score on anyone, but that's still a problem. They can get scored on by anyone as well. Let's talk about how these teams enter this game a little bit differently. A&M still has a game tonight against Vanderbilt, and I believe Florida does as well. Let me just check here. No, their game against Georgia was the only game before this weekend matchup. But Florida, to me, is a team that has transitioned from relying a little bit too much on Walter Clayton Jr. and Will Richards' heroics to now having one of the deepest front courts in all of college basketball. You can throw Alex Condon, Micah Hanlockton, Tommy Haug, and Ruben Chinyelu out there, and all of them can produce for you. In fact, both Haug and Chinyelu last Sunday posted double-doubles. It's the first time this season that multiple Florida players had double-doubles in the same game in the SEC. That's significant that both of them are some of your front court stars. And going up against this Texas A&M team whose credo has really been defense, I think that could be a true challenge for them. And the way they've been playing offensively, where they're a little bit too Jekyll and Hyde for my liking, could see Florida continue to dominate in the front court as well. And like I said, Texas A&M does not have the best record this season against top 5 competition. And yes, Florida may fall a little bit, but not as far as out of the top 10 to this point. So I truly believe that Texas A&M has to weather the storm of this Florida Gators front court and hope that Wade Taylor IV puts in a sterling performance from the perimeter himself. Because that's the only way I can really see A&M try and beat this Florida Gators team their own way, but I just don't see it. I think that even though Florida got knocked down a peg by Georgia, they're still elite enough offensively to the point where a Texas A&M team that has struggled to compete with top 10 competition, has struggled, especially offensively in such games, will not be able to contain guys like Haug, Chinyelu, and Condon, and Mike Hanlockton down low. So, in terms of my predictions for this specific game, I believe that Florida could boat race this Texas A&M team. I feel that this could be a game where it gets out of hand, and this Texas A&M team will really struggle to get going. But, like I said, they have a nice perimeter threat in Wade Taylor IV, but I just don't know if he's going to be enough on the night to truly contend with this Florida Gators front court. Don't get me wrong, there are some impressive players in their own right within this Texas A&M front court. I like Zurich Phelps. I believe Pharrell Payne is there now. Obaseki is a brilliant inside-outside guy, but I just don't see them being able to contain these guys. So that's why I'm taking Florida over the full 60 minutes. They're a team highly capable of doing better than what they did against Georgia. I just think it's a blip on the road. I really am not taking that game into too much consideration when it comes to Florida. But that defense is a bit of a worry for Florida if I'm thinking about the NCAA tournament. But like I said, Florida, I'm predicting, might just boat race this A&M team, potentially to the tune of, say, an 82-68 kind of scoreline. I think that A&M might have a couple of moments where they can go on a couple of runs, but it's going to highly depend on Wade Taylor IV shooting the lights out of the place to keep up with this Florida Gators squad. Now let's transition to another interesting game, maybe not as important for both teams concerned because both of them are safely in the NCAA tournament and no one really has underperformed against top 10 teams like Texas A&M in this matchup. But Kentucky and Auburn is still a game that I really want to see because Kentucky has been a team that has snuck up on a lot of top 5 competition, and they have a win over Duke. Yes, it was a while ago, but they have done the business in the SEC at the very least. Otega Oweh has been one of the most impressive players in the SEC all season long, but he's going up against potentially the most impressive player in the entire country in Johnny Broome, cementing his case to potentially usurp Cooper Flagg in terms of the Wooden Award at 31 points, 14 rebounds against Georgia over the weekend. And I think that's his highest point total in all his seasons at Auburn. Not his career overall, though. He did have 32 in his game with Morehead State in the OVC tournament. That was his highest total with his Auburn Tigers team. They do have a midweek game, Auburn against Ole Miss. I think they will be fine there. But let's talk about this Kentucky team because they have battled injury as well. Both Jackson Robinson and I believe Lamont Butler in their backcourt are nursing injuries. Maybe missed this game. They still are a very impressive squad. They have lost to, say, the higher caliber top 10 teams in the SEC. They've beaten kind of the teams that they could be able to beat within the top 25, but not teams like Auburn and Alabama. In fact, their loss on Saturday to Alabama was their first loss when leading by 10-plus points. So they prove that they can stick around with this top-end SEC talent, but they haven't really been able to do it over a full 60 minutes, and that's the concern here against Auburn. There still are more than the sum of their parts. I do believe that, though, this Kentucky defense is going to be a big problem for them. That loss to Alabama was the 4th time this season they allowed 95-plus points, and no other SEC team, no matter how impressive and underrated and potentially underappreciated Kentucky has gone in the SEC, has more than 2 such games of giving up 95 points. Even Alabama, who themselves give up a lot of points. Kentucky is the only team. They do have another midweek game against Oklahoma, a team that themselves are trying to look to stay out of the bubble picture. But I think that this game is still going to be interesting in terms of predicting because Kentucky are perfectly capable of scoring against a team like Auburn. But Auburn, in my opinion, just can rotate a lot with you and also be able to find the matchups not just in their starting lineup, but along their bench as well. Chaney Johnson, Dahad Pettiford have been players that stepped up. Miles Kelly as a perimeter threat. So you never know what you're going to get with Auburn, and that's why I like them this game. I think it could be a high-scoring affair, but I'm going to say it's going to be 77-70 in Auburn's favor. They've been keeping a couple games close, but I like them in this one. Then let's transition over to Alabama going up against Tennessee. Alabama, an interesting team. Alabama are a team that do not handle being down by 10-plus points very well. 0-5 when trailing by double digits. The only team without a double-digit comeback until that aforementioned win against Kentucky. But that's what you want to see if you're Alabama. Wins like against Kentucky because they're not going to win games with their defense, right? They're going to win games with their offense. If their offense can find themselves in difficult situations and claw their way back out, chances are we can maybe see this Alabama team go on a deep run. It's going to highly depend on how this offense can handle those situations in a pressure cooker environment like the NCAA tournament. And I really think that both Alabama and Tennessee are very similar squads. Now, Tennessee are a team that I really like because of their guard play. And Zakai Zegler and Chad Lanier have saved their best basketball for the end of the regular season. And I believe that this Tennessee team is going a little bit underrated in terms of the SEC just because they can win in so many different ways, but they are, in my opinion, one of the best three-point shooting teams in the SEC because of what Lanier and Zakai Zegler can do. But I have to give kudos to Coach Rick Barnes here as well. Rick Barnes with his 50th career win in defeating Texas A&M on Saturday over an AP top 10 team. The kudos to him as well. It's not just the players, it's the coaching as well. Rick Barnes consistently one of college basketball's elite head coaches. But heading into this game, this could be potentially the offensive showcase of the weekend for the SEC. Now, it might not project well for these teams' March Madness chances because of how bad they could look defensively. But Tennessee, and the reason why I think they can win this game, is an elite SEC defense to me. And that's why I feel that if Alabama get behind in this game early, there's no chance of them clawing back like they did against Kentucky. So, even though Alabama are highly capable of challenging this Tennessee team and stretching the floor on them, Tennessee, to me, just have a little bit more firepower both ways. They have Zakai Zegler, a steady point guard in terms of the way he can score, the way he controls the game most importantly, and then Chaz Lanier shooting the lights out, and an elite defense to back it up. Whereas Alabama is just a little bit too reliant, in my opinion, on just outscoring you. While they have elite scores at every level of their starting five, I just don't think it's sustainable enough in terms of the stretch run in the SEC to where they can continue to win like this. Maybe they can get away with it in the NCAA Tournament. That's also the reason as to why they potentially could not make a deep run in the NCAA Tournament this year. So that's why I'm taking Tennessee in this one, 83-81 in my opinion. I think there could be a last-second buzzer beater in this one. It could be a thrilling end-to-end game. But I just think Tennessee right now is the more well-balanced team, even though Alabama, in my humble opinion, is just a little bit better offensively. They just have to rely on it to show up in order for them to truly be competitive down the stretch. And last but not least, an exciting Big 12 matchup, a little bit more underappreciated in my mind than some of these other matches we talked about. But how about Arizona taking on Iowa State? Iowa State really is a team that is predicated on their stars producing and then having that elite airtight defense to lock you down over 60 minutes. But they did have their two stars, Keyshawn Gilbert and Curtis Jones, sitting out in Saturday's game. I just want to check here who was against Oklahoma State. Yesterday they got upset, and then as well against Houston. That was the two games they lost thus far. But Arizona are a team that I think is also relying too much on their stars as well. I think that they're a team that can beat anybody just because of Caleb Love's caliber of play, but also can lose to anybody. And I just feel that Arizona is one of those teams that could be underrated in the NCAA tournament, but we might choose to overrate them just a little bit. And games against teams like Iowa State where they have to win. And Iowa State could be unhealthy enough to where Arizona State could pull it off because they, like I said, they do rely on a lot of their senior talent, and a lot of that senior talent are sitting out. And that's the reason why they weren't competitive in their past two games. But because of that defense, anything can happen. And Arizona State are one of those teams where I just can't rely on them too much to get going. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm taking Iowa State in that game. But coming up next, we transition to another topic in college basketball concerning Cooper Flagg and his potentially shocking decision to stay at Duke for one more season. We'll be right back after this short break to talk about it.